Do you feel like experiencing something new? Then come along on a wonderful week-long journey across Nova Scotia, the adventurous province here in the east of Canada.
Ich bin Österreicher, wir baden zu Hause normalerweise in Gletscherseen. Das ist best!
Nova Scotia. This is a province that embodies the soul of Canada like no other. Here, where more than 275 years ago the first British settlers landed and founded Halifax as the gateway to the New World, our journey begins aboard the BMW R1300GS Adventure. My son and I are setting off today from the maritime metropolis of Halifax on the famous Route 333, the first section of the legendary Lighthouse Route, which will lead us to one of the most photographed landmarks in all of Canada. Halifax combines the charm of a historic harbour town with the dynamic energy of a modern metropolis. From here, all of Nova Scotia's major attractions can be reached within just a few hours, the perfect starting point for our conquest of the Maritimes. Yet only a few kilometers beyond the city limits, it becomes clear why Nova Scotia is one of the undiscovered gems among motorcycle destinations. Route 333 surprises already within the first few kilometers with a landscape of dramatic intensity that shatters European imagination. Forest, water, sea and lakes alternate in such a rapid rhythm that you can hardly keep track. Is that beside the road a freshwater lake or a bay of the ocean? This unique symbiosis of maritime roughness and forested gentleness fundamentally shapes the riding experience. One moment you glide through dense spruce forests, the next, the view opens up to the endless expanse of the Atlantic. After 45 kilometers, we reach Peggy's Cove, a tiny fishing village with barely 60 inhabitants that has become an icon of Canada's eastern coast. The lighthouse towers majestically atop the characteristic granite rocks, smoothed by Ice Age glaciers, and now the subject of countless postcards. These geological masterpieces, formed more than 400 million years ago, stretch out toward the Atlantic like a lunar landscape. A short photo stop at Queensland Beach reveals the full ambivalence of this coastline. White sandy beaches with Caribbean aesthetics, yet water temperatures that only under the best conditions invite you to swim. And so we navigate between peninsulas and the mainland, passing through the picture-perfect little town of Chester until we reach Mahon Bay, perhaps the most iconic photographic motif on Canada's eastern coast. The three churches standing side by side along the harbour form a scene of timeless beauty that has adorned postcards since 1900. All along the coast we spot the characteristic Adirondack chairs, a brilliant idea by Parks Canada. Since 2011, they have placed more than 400 of these red chairs at spectacular locations, deliberately as a symbol of no stress and pure relaxation. Our destination for the day, Lunenburg, finally welcomes us with a picturesque perfection that makes us feel we have truly arrived. The harbour is a living museum of maritime history. The famous colourful wooden houses from the 18th and 19th centuries reflect in the calm waters of Lunenburg Bay, while traditional schooners and modern fishing boats gently bob side by side in harmony. We park the BMW R1300GS Adventure next to the Smoke Pit restaurant and enjoy barbecue cuisine with a view of the Atlantic.
Julia, I just heard that there are also guys from Texas coming to the spot enjoying the barbecue. What makes you special?
We smoke all of our meats for 15 hours. Everything is made in-house. All of our rubs, all of our sauces, all of our meats are also sourced locally from Canada. We take pride in everything we do here. We really enjoy the product we put out, knowing that people who do it professionally enjoy everything that we do. You know, it's very nice to hear that the people who do it where they're from also come here and know that we're doing it well.
Okay. And now the most important information for us motorcycle riders is, when do we have the best weather and the least chance for rain?
Definitely right now. Yeah, like you are here at the best time. This is from roughly like June to August, September is the time for all the sun, all the good weather. You get a nice, like, not too much breeze as well. The wind, I know, can also be an issue. It's beautiful driving, very clear. Like, can't get any better time than the summer months.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you
a
very
great
much.
time.
You as well.
Goodbye.
We've now arrived in the beautiful little town of Lunenburg. And the thing is, we've just learned that this is actually the best time to experience Nova Scotia. Apparently, rain and bad weather are a big topic here, but not for us, not for me. Somehow we've had amazing weather ever since we arrived, and I don't really know why that is, but the colors here are just incredibly fascinating and intense. The air is crystal clear, the sky is blue, and the green, from my point of view, easily competes with the color tones we've enjoyed in Ireland. What's also worth mentioning is that people here have been talking about the high season when we've been out and about with them. Only the so-called high season looks very different from what we're used to. Compared to the Alpine regions, the level of tourism they call high season here is, for us, basically an off-season opportunity, if you can put it that way. So that means it's relatively quiet. The downside, of course, is that if you're traveling outside the main season, say if you start too early in the year, around mid-May, then a lot of the tourist infrastructure is still closed. We've also seen that, for example, cruise ships dock in Halifax, and then these cruise buses, the tour companies, drive down to Peggy's Cove. And there you can have relatively many tourists concentrated in just a few places who, of course, want to see those beautiful scenic spots. What really struck us today, what's so fascinating about Nova Scotia, is this intense combination of rural idyll, like this picture-perfect world. You know, you ride through these neighborhoods, through the front yards of friendly people, no fences anywhere, everything's peaceful, harmonious. It really feels like you're traveling through a perfect world. But then, on the other hand, when you get closer to the sea, when you ride past the rocky shores, you suddenly feel this intense grayness of the Atlantic. There's a bit of wind coming up now. I hope it's not too annoying on the mic, but you can sense the rough, harsh, wild side of Nova Scotia coming through. Those are the two main impressions I've taken away this first morning. This perfect world atmosphere, almost pastel colored, like something out of a storybook. And I don't know if it comes across well on video, but as you ride through these little towns, you just glide along. Everything feels calm, no one's stressed, everything's neat and tidy. But what I personally also really like is that sense of adventure. And that adventure feeling here comes almost entirely from the raw nature around you. Because the roads themselves are, of course, well paved. It's more of a smooth glide. To be honest, we're not really conquering any great challenge or extreme adventure here with the GS Adventure. It's more of a relaxed, flowing ride. The sense of adventure, the raw, wild vibe really only comes from the landscape itself, from that feeling of being immersed in it, of being part of something truly rough, raw, and wild. Yeah, those are my first impressions from Nova Scotia for you. Today, we skipped the curves and instead enjoyed history and landscape. We set out from the southern part of the Nova Scotia Peninsula, starting in Halifax, and rode north toward the Annapolis Valley. We naturally took the old road, not the new highway, so there were barely any curves at all. But still, somehow, such a ride has its own charm, especially when you come from a more densely populated area. At one point, the navigation system showed next intersection in 40 kilometers. And so you just glide through the endless expanse of the Canadian wilderness. You get time to think a little, to reflect, and to look forward to the stories that still await you. Surprisingly, once you reach the northern part, up toward the Annapolis Valley, suddenly the wine region begins. Quite astonishing, because for most people outside of Nova Scotia, the province feels like a truly wild, rugged place where the weather is usually bad. You'd expect many things here, but certainly not an excellent wine region. Yet there are actually some really beautiful, appealing and even sophisticated wineries that would please even the most complex wine enthusiasts. We took a look around, enjoyed life a bit. We didn't drink anything, we didn't buy anything, just strolled around, took in the atmosphere, and learned a bit about the local history. You see, this region was first settled in the 17th century by the Acadians, just a few hundred French settlers who made their home here in Nova Scotia. With truly elaborate irrigation techniques, they managed to tame the wilderness. They built ponds, complex irrigation systems, cultivated wheat, various fruits and vegetables, and created a truly prosperous community in this region. By the 18th century, there were even more than 10,000 Acadians living here. But the wars between England and France eventually led to this region being handed over to the English colonies. The English authorities then expelled the Acadians. During this expulsion, they were scattered to all corners of the Atlantic world. Some ended up in Louisiana, others stayed here, and many sadly perished. But to this day, many proud descendants of the Acadians still live here in Nova Scotia. And perhaps that's why the region around the Annapolis Valley still has this strong agricultural tradition, maybe something that's been passed down from those Acadian ancestors. On the way back toward Halifax, we stopped at a small lake right off the highway exit, Sandy Beach, and once again it was striking how close this raw nature lies to the city. Just 3 minutes after leaving the highway, you find yourself at these wonderfully secluded lakes. It's amazing how the wilderness here has survived so close to the city. That's partly because after the last ice age, 10,000 to 20,000 years ago, many lakes were left behind by the retreating glaciers. Above these granite formations, there's only a thin layer of usable soil around Halifax. So for the early settlers and seafarers, it didn't make much sense to practice agriculture here. As a result, even just outside the city, you still find untouched nature, these small, beautiful lakes. And that's always fascinating. It's also great that with the R1300GS Adventure, I can simply ride right up to all of them, take the occasional gravel road along the way. That's the charm of such an adventure bike. You can easily include all those little adventures. Today, once again, we clearly saw the versatility of this machine. On one hand, gliding effortlessly along the highway. It's fantastic. Just set the cruise control, relax, enjoy, and cover kilometers without a thought about range. And on the other hand, you can dive straight into the hectic city traffic or head down some gravel tracks without any problem at all. The truly beautiful places begin right where the asphalt ends. That's just how it is. It wasn't difficult terrain going down there, but it was a gravel road that would be pretty uncomfortable on a regular motorcycle. That's why, with an adventure touring bike, you just glide through without a problem. Today was an intense day, a long route along the southern coast from Halifax, heading east. And now let's take a walk together along the beach. This was the longest stage so far on the Enduro. We're now on our way back toward our starting point because tomorrow we'll be riding the Cabot Trail, so we'll head all the way up to Sydney. What I've learned about Nova Scotia today is that its rugged wilderness begins quite literally right at the roadside. Off the main routes, there aren't really many options to explore the landscape simply because the landscape itself is wild nature. But here and there, when there are special highlights, like the wonderful beach at Taylor's Head, there's a nice gravel track leading down. Of course, we took it and rode all the way down to Taylor's Head. It's a beautiful sandy beach, maybe 8 kilometers long or something like that. There were only 2 other people there. Otherwise, we had the place to ourselves. And even now, I'm here at another lovely beach. The weather for riding has been perfect today, between 15 and 23 degrees all day long. But of course, it's not exactly beach holiday weather for most people. The water, though, isn't that bad. We actually went in a little at Taylor's Head, and it was warmer than expected because it's quite calm today. Hardly any wind and the sea very still. There's not much of that ice-cold Atlantic water coming in. I was expecting it to be worse, to be honest. Another thing we noticed today is that the speed on the roads is generally quite low. Even on country roads, most people cruise along at around 80 kilometers per hour. And if you go faster than 100, you start to feel guilty, like you're some kind of road hooligan. So it's definitely not a destination for speed junkies. I wouldn't call it that. The curves so far have all been quite wide and flowing, more for cruising and gliding than for carving corners. But on the Cabot Trail, I think we'll find those tighter bends. Overall, it's not at all like what we're used to in the Dolomites or Central Europe, where I usually ride. Here, it's wide landscapes, wide horizons, and they have plenty of space. So even the bends have plenty of room. Some of you might love that, while others might think, okay, I'd prefer tighter corners, more of that adrenaline-filled, twisty riding. This isn't really the place for that. What you do have here, though, is a pleasant closeness to civilization. It's not as remote or isolated as the central provinces of Canada. You're always within relatively short distances of all sorts of roads and modern comforts. Yet, still, after just a couple of turns off the main route, you feel completely alone again, surrounded by wilderness. Even at the more touristy highlights, like this beach, for instance, you never encounter crowds like you would in Europe. If you think of places like Scotland or Ireland, equally stunning landscapes, there you always have thousands of people in the high season who, just like you, want to experience something beautiful. Here, it's so much quieter. Today, the GS had to handle what was probably the longest day's ride of the trip. And today, for the first time, I actually had to refuel. Up to now, I'd only stopped to fill up because I thought, why not? Might as well. But today, it was necessary. And once again, it performed beautifully. I'll admit, on the long stretch, I would have appreciated the firmer seat option. But apart from that, there's really nothing to complain about. It's been a loyal companion. And earlier, again, I noticed how convenient it is to have that assistance system when putting the bike up on the main stand. It might seem a bit decadent, but when you're fully loaded, you realize, okay, that's actually really nice, really comfortable, something I wouldn't want to give up anymore. No, funny how quickly you get used to things that suddenly start to feel completely normal. Today was the day we had been working toward for the entire trip. From Sydney, we were finally heading to the legendary Cabot Trail. But even the first few kilometers showed us that this ride would surpass everything we had experienced so far here in Nova Scotia. The first highlight came surprisingly early, the Seal Island Bridge on the way to the Cabot Trail. It had something imposing, majestic, almost mighty about it. Gliding over it on the motorcycle was already an incredible feeling for us. This bridge doesn't just connect two shores, but for us, it connects entire worlds. In Sydney, we had to make an important decision. You can take the Englishtown ferry and skip a small section to spend more time on the main part of the Cabot Trail. But we decided right from the start in Sydney to take the route further south along Highway NS30 to enjoy the maximum fun of curves in the southern section of the Cabot Trail. That decision turned out to be absolutely the right one. And it's the route I would recommend to any of you as well. And it was there on the NS30 that the beautiful, wide, sweeping curves began, leading us northward. We rode the Cabot Trail counterclockwise, which, by the way, is also the recommended direction for all motorcyclists. Along these curves, you have the foothills of the Appalachians extending right down to the water with relatively steep climbs and descents. However, the roads here are much wider than what we European riders are used to in the Alps or the Pyrenees. Back home in the Alps, the curves tend to be much tighter, whereas here the roads are broad and flowing. That makes gliding through this imposing landscape incredibly relaxing. We enjoyed the views of the Atlantic, wound our way northward, soaking in the wilderness and untouched scenery. The weather forecast had been rather modest, but in the end, the weather turned out fantastic. We were even a bit overdressed, so we stopped for a short break at Blackbrook Beach and even dared to go into the water. According to the station at the entrance of the national park, the water temperature was exactly 11.5 degrees. From there, we continued north. Along the way, unfortunately, we ran into several annoying construction zones. Because of the short summer season here in Nova Scotia, that time is used to repair the damage caused by winter. So during the riding season, you have to expect construction work along the route every now and then. What we didn't manage to do this time was take the extra loop all the way up toward Meat Cove. That's where we turned off to the left. And that would be my suggestion for anyone planning to do this trip themselves. Don't make Sydney your base. Instead, stay somewhere around Baddeck and start from there, further west and closer to the Cabot Trail. That way you miss out on the sea line stretch, but in return you get to include the spectacular northern coastline at Meat Cove. The western coast of the Cabot Trail then showed itself with a more French character, while on Cape Breton Island, the eastern and northern sections had felt more Scottish in influence. Here, though, the atmosphere was distinctly French again. We ended the day in Baddeck, where we enjoyed a classic and delicious chowder and salmon at the freight shed right by the harbour, with a beautiful view of the water before rolling back towards Sydney. When planning our route, we actually made a mistake. We only scheduled one day here on the Cabot Trail. In hindsight, it would be much better to take 2 or even 3 days to truly enjoy it, to go hiking or to visit the wonderfully curated Alexander Graham Bell Museum in Baddeck. But in a way, that just gives us the perfect reason to come back here again someday. Today, we're starting the final stage of our trip, and the sky is completely overcast, but you shouldn't let that fool you. Most mornings here in Nova Scotia have started with fog hanging over the landscape, and yet every single day has turned out to be great weather in the end. So, honestly, don't let the forecasts unsettle you. On 4 out of 5 days, we had a 40% chance of rain according to the forecast, but not a single drop ever fell. Of course, it can also go the other way, but apparently the weather here just isn't all that predictable. Yesterday, for example, was forecasted to be terrible, rain and clouds, and we ended up with sunshine almost the entire day. So I'm not worried at all. I'll just get the bike ready now. You can see here, for example, something I wanted to show you. When you climb on and off the bike using the panniers, you end up scuffing them a bit with your boots. You can already see a few scratches on this plastic cover here. But interestingly, the frame itself seems to be very well protected, not a single scratch so far. What you really have to get used to on such a tall bike is mounting it properly. No matter whether it's standing on the side stand or not, it's easiest to step onto the foot peg first and then swing your leg over. That way you don't hit the panniers. Apart from that, the bike has picked up its fair share of dirt by now. No stone chips or anything serious though. At this point, we've ridden a total of about 1,800 kilometers with the bike, and everything's been perfect so far. No error messages on the display either. What I've learned about using Kalimoto is that I once again forgot to download the offline maps for Canada. And that really messes with the system. It tends to freeze up now and then. I've since fixed that, but note to self, always download the offline maps for Kalimoto, especially because cell reception in the remote areas can be quite weak. For those who don't know, I've been using Apple CarPlay with the Jiggy system. You might have seen it in some shots. When navigating, I often switched between systems depending on what I needed at the moment. For example, I used the arrow navigation in the BMW display for quick commands like getting back to the hotel, which I had saved as a favorite. For on-the-fly changes, like when we decided to check out a beach or grab something to eat, I used Google Maps on the top display. The overall route planning, however, was done with Kalimoto, and I also used it for navigation during the entire riding day. So I was constantly juggling between these 3 navigation tools, and in practice that actually worked really well. I only lost the Jiggy connection to my phone once all week, and a quick restart fixed it. Otherwise, every morning I'd just start Kalimoto on my phone, hit start tour, then fire up the bike, and it would immediately connect and continue the navigation. Overall, that setup has proven to be a really nice and practical addition for me on this trip. We've now been on the road for almost a week, my son and I, with the BMW R1300GS Adventure. We've explored the coasts, the gentle hills, the rugged nature, and the vast open spaces of Nova Scotia. For us Europeans, or for me as an Austrian, it was fascinating to realize how much space there is here. Even this one small province covers 55,000 square kilometers, while Austria has 80,000. But here live only 900,000 people, compared to 9 million back home. That alone shows how much there's still to discover in Canada. Of course, not everything went perfectly, but for anyone planning a similar trip, here are a few key differences between riding in Canada and in Europe. First, the curves. Even the best motorcycle roads here have much wider bends than what we're used to. If you love tight technical turns and scraping foot pegs, that kind of adrenaline-fueled corner riding, the Dolomites, Portugal, or the Pyrenees are better. In North America, roads are simply built broader, more flowing. It takes a bit of adjustment, but eventually you start to appreciate that feeling of endless space, just gliding through the landscape as if time slows down. The GS Adventure really fits that style perfectly. Nova Scotia is also a good entry point for Europeans. The scenery is diverse enough, never monotonous. Unlike central Canada or the US interior, you don't ride endless straight lines. Here, you might have 150 kilometers between turns, but it's 150 kilometers of pure beauty with maybe 3 cars coming the other way. Another thing that stands out, the sense of solitude. Populations here are concentrated in small hubs, and outside of them, it's just open wilderness. That's something we rarely experience in Europe. Locals here might warn you about heavy traffic on the Cabot Trail, but that means 10 cars an hour. Even the tourist hotspots feel empty compared to the Alps, the Ring of Kerry, or the Stelvio Pass. You just have to reset your expectations. From movies, we associate North America with mega cities and endless highways full of people. But out here, you start wondering where all those millions actually are. And that's part of the magic. And one major difference and one of the most fascinating is the wilderness. Yeah, you don't have that in Europe anymore. That's both good and bad. The bad part, where there's wilderness, there's no infrastructure. You can't just turn down a gravel road to explore, because wilderness here truly means untouched nature. No paths, no service roads. But the good part, you're surrounded by unspoiled forests, lakes, and coastline. It's a kind of purity that's rare to find back home. After a week here, I feel even more relaxed than after my US rides. The vibe is just calmer. The people friendly, everything easygoing. It's been a genuinely pleasant trip. There are downsides, of course. The weather is unpredictable. For example, the last 3 days have been so windy that filming was almost impossible. I'm literally hiding behind a warehouse for shelter, but we haven't had a drop of rain all week, which is apparently rare. Many riders told me they've had rough conditions here, so luck definitely plays a role. It's a bit like riding along Europe's Atlantic coastlines. The short riding season also means few rental options. If you plan a trip, consider combining it with the US East Coast. Maybe start from Boston and cross the border. Otherwise, renting in Nova Scotia is possible, but limited. So what's the takeaway? If you're lucky, you've got 80 years, maybe 90, if not 70 or 50. Use them, make the most of them. Get on your bike and go somewhere, and it doesn't have to be Canada. It could be the next mountain around the corner. But next year is too late. Use your time. Do the things that make you feel alive, because the moments in the saddle, those are the ones you'll remember. That's true for me too. I remember every meaningful ride, and I only regret the ones I didn't take or the ones I was too stressed to truly enjoy. So, make the time, enjoy life, and live it fully. You only get one. Take care, ride safe, and see you soon on 1000 PS TV.